1976 Syndicate website. So please hit the got it on there so that you know we're all playing by the rules. And we'll cover a couple of ground rules before we get started while we wait. The Syndicate does have well over I think 100 plus members at this point. So a lot of people can't join us on Tuesday nights. There's always a lot going on, and they will watch these videos on the back end. So we ask that you keep your computers on mute until we get to the question and answer portion. And then as we call on you, go ahead and unmute. If you've got questions or comments that you'd like to make, please raise your hand in the chat on the bottom of your screen, and we will call on you and get to those after the formal presentation, which is usually around 20 minutes or so, and then we'll spend the rest of the time in discussion and question and answer. Please don't record the calls. Again, we do that. It's proprietary, and we will take care of it on our end. Members get to watch these on the back end. And again, the ground rules for playing fair, we do believe in the rules of civil discourse here. So please keep your responses, questions, everything else. Pretend that there are children in the room and they're not children of liberals who, okay, that's enough said. Keep it clean is what we're saying. Clean and respectful. Poor conduct will mute your mic, kick you out. And we've not had to do that, and we don't expect to do that, but we cover those ground rules every single time. So that is enough of that. I'm going to introduce tonight's guest tonight. I'm very excited to have with us a college student, Mrs. Taalyr Claridge. And I will tell everyone right now that I met Taalyr the first time on October 5th, 1991. And she was born into my hands, and I cut her umbilical cord, which means we've got a very close bond and a special relationship. She is my daughter, but more than that, she is a patriot, a citizen, a fine young adult. And as she's been described in every circle that I've ever been around, a breath of fresh air. So you can see my background here. There's a breath of fresh air behind me, a supercell. Taalyr Claridge is the supercell that we need in the alliances that we form in our communities today. She is a mother of 2 children, the wife of a law enforcement officer and a veteran. Her husband's the veteran, which makes her a veteran as well. She's homeschooled her children until recently. She put her oldest daughter in public school after doing a very thorough, extensive, and exhaustive interview process. And she still homeschools her youngest in kindergarten. She is attending college full-time with the hopes of getting a law degree down the road. Taalyr is an eBay seller. She has a side business, so she is an entrepreneur. She has taught classical ballet, and she teaches classical ballet at a local dance studio. She's been a classical ballet instructor for nearly 10 years now, a decade. And she's taught people all over the United States, both online and in person. And as she puts it, her experiences based on not only what she does as a mother and a professional woman, but she also spent time in a restaurant cooking and in retail sales as a preschool teacher. And those experiences, as she puts it, are very much related to her interest in law and politics. Her ultimate goal is to get her law degree and start fighting back from the inside out. So what she's noticed in her college career so far is that she's struggling against critical race theory in college and academia. And it was not a mountain, these are her words, that she expected to climb along the way. But it has made her realize that her fight starts now, not later. And I think I want all of us to come away with tonight, and everyone who watches this in the future, that this fight is now and we cannot wait. So if you know something, if you're seeing something, if you are living this, if you've got students in college, students in high school, and you need to start paying attention to these things. And I asked Taalyr I sent her out an official invite, just like I do all of our guests. I didn't treat her any different than anybody else. And her closing statement when she sent her bio in was, there is certainly much to be said about the perils of our time. Yes, but also the hope. And knowledge is power. And that's what we are going to get tonight, is knowledge and power from Taalyr Claridge. So Taalyr, go ahead, and I'm going to give the floor to you. I'll yield it to you. I'm going to mute my mic. And
well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Rod, AKA Dad. And I have to say that you saw your background, your storm clouds, as a breath of fresh air. And I think, too, that it's fitting because I see it as there's a storm brewing, and we all have a part in changing it for the better and making sure that the outcome of this storm is not going to negatively impact our children and future generations. So I do just want to start really quick by saying thank you so much to Jim and to Rod, my dad, for the incredible work that you guys are doing. Our country right now, more than ever, needs people who see what is going on and use the skills that they have to help educate others and change our country for the better. So thank you guys for having me on here and for being willing to do the work that you're doing. You are answering the call, and I can't say thank you to you without also saying thank you to all your subscribers, the people who are here and those who will be watching later. You are just as much a part of this change as they are, and I'm so stoked to be in your company right now and really honored and humbled. I definitely have been experiencing a few butterflies in the hours leading up to this conversation. And certainly a little inkling of that is a bit of stage fright. I'm not a public speaker like my last week's predecessor, Alex Weber, or like Jim or Rod. So I do want to thank you in advance for your gracious listening. But even more than that, I have to say that this feeling inside of me is really more that I have been so moved to share my story as it relates to the college experience and my life and the world around us, because I know that that's how we will affect change. So as nervous as I feel, as uncomfortable as I feel in situations, I know that sometimes we have to put ourselves out there because the words that we have, the story we have to tell is more important than the discomfort we might feel. So thank you again. With that said, like Rod said, I am Taalyr Claridge. I am a wife to a veteran and law enforcement officer, and those are both the same person, just to be clear. I am a mother to two beautiful blessings, ages 9 and 5, and really that takes up a lot of my time. I have a little bit of an untraditional background, I guess you could say, and Rod kind of touched on that, but I'll give it to you in my own words. I was homeschooled all the way through my formative years, and part of that was because I was focusing heavily on my classical ballet training, and I've been fortunate enough for that to have followed me all the way through into adulthood. And I'm so thankful to have had opportunities to really teach people of all ages and so many different walks of life all over the United States. And I think one of the beautiful things about having kind of a non-traditional, I guess as society would see it, a non-traditional background is that it kind of becomes second nature to question the narrative, to question things that we're being told. And I guess that just comes from being used to always going against the grain, right? So fast forward through my life to a few years ago when the whole world started melting down. And I know you know what I'm talking about. I think probably a lot of us are here today as a result of some of the things that have happened in the last few years. But when that started happening, I found myself asking a lot of questions. I was asking myself questions about health, questions like, why in some states are they trying to mandate vaccines to children, little people, vaccines that have been proven to harm these little kids even more. They're doing more damage than the virus that they are meant to protect against. Why is that? I found myself asking questions about professions. Like, why, when my husband is so willing to put his life on the line every day, he's so willing to die for somebody that he doesn't even know, why is that the case? Yet his profession is the very profession that is being targeted by the most hate in this country right now. I started to weigh all of these questions kind of against the backdrop of our government in the United States and against the backdrop of our Constitution. And what I found from the perspective of a mother was that I am raising my children in a world that I never expected I would have to raise them in. I'm raising my children in a world that, like, I didn't even have to grow up in. And that realization really stirred up a lot of fear in me. I'm not normally a super fearful person, but when I look at my children and I see their innocence and I think about all the catastrophes that are impending because of the oversight and the ignorance of people in our world, I found myself going inward into almost a state of mourning, right? I was like Johnny Cash. I'm going to wear black until the world changes. That's kind of how I felt. And I stayed there for a good long while. It was several months until I had a dear friend look at me one day and she said, "Taalyr, you know what?" She said, "This feeling that you have is actually not in accordance with God's will. Rather, God actually calls us, He commands us to have a spirit of thanksgiving in any and every circumstance." Such simple words, right? But I really started to take them to heart. I really started to dwell on them. And pretty soon I found myself asking a new question. And that question was this: what can I do to help? How can I help? I look at my little innocent kids and I'm sitting here thinking, like, who's going to come save them? Right? Like, who's it going to be? And then I realized, I started to remember again that I live in the United States of America. I live in a representative democracy where people long ago fought and died to protect my right to have a say in the lives of my children. So obviously I'm very fired up about this. And I'm so excited to be able to share this information with you guys. It was about that time that I remembered that my husband, through his work union, his agency supplies a free college benefit. Now, this benefit is online, and it's out of a college in Ohio. It's a community college physical location, but they also provide online college to family members who are covered under this union. And the more I thought about this, I kind of felt this almost guttural prompting to start learning more about law. I was kind of looking into, like, what are the strengths that I have that I can make even better, that I can work on to make this world a better place for my kids and for everybody else's kids, right? So I keep having this thought about law. I finally decide, okay, we're going to bite the bullet. I'm going to try it. I'm this little homeschool kid from, small town Montana. And I don't even know, like, if I can get into college. Anyway, by the grace of God, I was able to get in and begin this incredible journey. I knew it was going to be hard from the beginning because I'm already maxed out. You know, I'm a busy mother, an entrepreneur. I teach, I have a lot going on. So I went into this knowing, okay, there's going to be some roadblocks. There's going to be some things that I have to work around. I understand that. So I feel better prepared. I also went into it with the knowledge that, yes, the college education system is heavily inundated with liberal ideologies at this time. So I felt kind of like, well, if I know these things, then I'm prepared, right? Well, let me tell you what, nothing could have prepared me for the adventures and the lessons that I have learned this last year, when I have realized exactly how saturated this education system is with the woke agenda. I actually wrote down, because this is very important information and I want to be very clear. I want everyone to know what's going on. I learned 4 facts about the college system in this last year. The first is that critical race theory is alive and active with the leftist agenda. The second is that it is in colleges from the community level to the online level, like I'm doing, all the way up to Ivy League. I know that now. The third fact is that even the most innocent sounding college curricula are laced with woke ideologies. So chew on that for a minute. And by innocent sounding, I mean, you could be taking a computer class, okay? You could be taking a language class and you're still going to run into some form of leftist agenda in the college curriculum. And a lot of times this, like, it's kind of a slow burn, right? So you might not even, unless you're on high alert, you might not even realize what you're reading. But oftentimes in these lesser studies, it will present in their ethics units that they go through. And most of them do have an ethics unit. So even if it's a computer class. That leads me to the fourth fact that I have come to know, and that's that these woke ideologies are centered around falsely labeling individuals and backing them into a corner until they truly believe that their very existence is a nuisance and is toxic to society. This is critical race theory. It's not just about race. It's about gender. It's about religion. And yes, ethnicity. And last but not least, it's about money. Okay, so it's telling people what to think under the guise of inclusivity. And it's a lie. So like I talked about before, I had, kind of read and watched a lot of videos in the last year that sort of explained certain people's perspectives on how a conservative person should navigate the college world. And a lot of them, actually, most of them say, just keep your head down, do what you have to do, say what they want you to say so that you can get good grades and you can move on, graduate, and start changing the world, right? And while I do greatly respect that end goal, I came quickly to find that I actually have a strong moral obligation to speak what I know is truth, whether or not the rest of the people in my class agree with me. That doesn't change my obligation to the truth. So I'm going to go over a few things that some of my most recent studies have turned up as I've gone through my college textbooks and all of my required reading. The first thing is my American government class. If you are the note-taking type of human, you could definitely get your pen and paper out and paraphrase however you like, but I want you to know what is going on in these textbooks. So one of the first things in my American government class that I noted immediately was that, and mind you, this textbook was almost 800 pages, and I read it thoroughly from cover to cover, and noticed that only Democratic presidents were credited for having done anything positive in our society or our government. And not only the presidents, but only Democratic politicians in general were credited for having done anything positive. So Democrats were good. Obviously, what does that mean for the other side? Well, Republican political figures in these books were continually berated, degraded, and even almost mocked in these college textbooks. Another thing I learned while going through this American government textbook was that this one was pretty ironic, that all countries whose governments were, told to be or thought to be far superior, they were used as examples as being far superior from the United States government. Actually, all the ones they listed actually ended up being, at that time, all of the countries who had the most stringent lockdown measures during the COVID-19 chaos. And I'm smiling. I have to kind of chuckle at the irony of that. Understanding that these textbooks were written prior to this whole COVID situation. I kind of cringe to know what the next set of textbooks are going to look like, right? But this one, I'm not going to lie, I had to kind of take a screenshot of that portion of my textbook and send it to my sister-in-law. And I said, that didn't really age well, did it? And it's true, it didn't really age well. So in all of these courses that you take online, you are required to participate in a graded discussion where you have to answer these prompts from your instructors. And one of the first prompts that I was asked from my professor in American government was this. It was, can all Americans exert equal participation in government? So to me, that was a no-brainer. I mean, I live in the United States of America, right? So I'm aware of our Constitution. I know my rights as an American citizen. I said, yes. The beauty of this country is that, yes, we can all experience equal participation. Of course, this was all supposed to be in light of the required coursework that we had done previously, which was heavily biased. Even so, I was a little bit naive, and I did not expect the attacks that would then ensue from my fellow classmates. And I have to quote one of them in particular. He accused me of parroting what I was taught as a child about the American Revolution. Now, mind you, in online college, it's a little bit unique because you have the option of creating like a profile. So the other students, they can see a picture of you, they can learn about your life or whatever. And I'm a busy person. I'm a busy mom. I'm just here to learn. So I hadn't done that. So these people who are responding to me, they have no idea who I am. This college classmate went on to say, if you want to talk history, let's talk history, but not the cheery after school special version. I was going to say what's a little bit ironic about that is that it became clear that my classmates largely viewed me as a white male, white supremacist conservative. And I laugh again because what's funny to me is that obviously they don't know this, I'm a female. Not only that, but I'm a registered member of a Native American tribe. And because of that, in this country, I am viewed as an ethnic minority. But actually, because of those things, that is why I am so thankful, you know, like, look at me, I'm an ethnic minority, I'm a woman, and yet here I am in a free country, and I am free to I am free to express my opinion with my fellow classmates. Like, how cool is that? We can have a public discourse and I'm not being arrested or berated for it. Well, I was a little bit berated. Anyway, I'm going to move on to my sociology class. Now, I thought American government was pretty wild, but sociology is a whole other beastly level. One of the things that was required reading in my sociology class was a 40+ page publication that linked the denial of scientific facts, the denial that is apparently a detriment to our earth. It linked the denial of scientific facts directly to conservative Christians who are uneducated. I don't know how you can call this a science, but that was required reading. Something else that was interesting is my professor in my sociology class, she pushed heavily for an entire unit the idea that the legalization and the decriminalization of any and all drugs, from marijuana to opiates, should occur across the nation. Now, obviously, as a mother, for me, I have some obvious concerns about how that could affect my life when I'm just out in public with my children, right? But also, as the wife of somebody who frequently deals with the public and with people who are often affected by serious drug addiction, I maybe have kind of a different perspective than most. And I can see how these kinds of behaviors are detrimental, in fact, to our society. Another point that was made in this sociology class was that you are a racist white male if you favor harsher punishment for criminals. So forget all those things I just said about me being a woman and Native American. It actually turns out that I am, in fact, a racist white male, according to my college curriculum. One of the other, I mean, I could go on for days. I do have to point this last thing out, that the gender inequality problem in our nation, according to my sociology textbook, is directly linked to chauvinist white male principles that were pushed by our founding fathers. Okay. And they also linked it to classic movies such as Gone with the Wind. Never once in that textbook was there any mention of the rape culture and the objectification of women in our society that's brought on by the normalization of pornography that's even in our schools today. Not only that, but they didn't even mention the fact that our society has consistently turned a blind eye to the pandemic of human trafficking, which in my opinion is today's modern day slave trade. So I want to wrap up. I know I've been talking for a minute. Thank you so much for listening. But I do want to say this, that in all of these courses, now I'm on my 7th one, I've been going for almost a year. I was one of the only people who had a dissenting, or rather who expressed a dissenting thought or opinion in my college discussions. Now, I say one of the only because I literally remember only one other fellow classmate who expressed his opinion one time. Now, keep in mind that we actually have to participate in multiple discussions that are graded each week. So if that gives you an idea of what's going on. Now, was I the only conservative person in these classes? I'm not sure. It could be that others were following, you know, the other conservative speakers' game plan of just keeping your head down. It could be. But nevertheless, I was the only one who was speaking out. And I have to say that I'm not mad at any of my fellow classmates or anything like that, but I am truly heartbroken. The farther I get into this experience, I am heartbroken because so many of these classmates, many of them kids, like fresh out of high school, some of them are still in high school and working on accelerated higher education, but they have clearly never been taught to think critically or to think for themselves. You know, they've clearly never been taught that there is a distinct line between education and indoctrination. And that line is this, that education, it teaches you how to reason, while indoctrination tells you what to think. So how do we change this? There's clearly an issue. What do we do? Well, you guys are already here. You're showing up and you're doing it. And really, I find that it starts with recognizing the first 3 words of the preamble to our Constitution. Say them with me. We, the people. And those words really bring tears to my eyes because it's such a beautiful and rare treasure to be able to live in a country where we can be a minority, we can be a religious minority, we can be any gender, and have the freedom to have a say in matters of government. We have the freedom to step up and change the tides of our society. I'm going to close with this and then I'll turn it over. I'm a believer. I believe in God and I try to dive into the Bible frequently. And as I've gone through it a few times, I've noticed something really amazing about this entire book. And it's this, that it is loaded with underdog stories. It is loaded with stories of people who succeeded against all the odds. It's loaded with stories about Rahab, who was a prostitute, right? And she helped to save God's people, and she became part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. It has stories of David and Goliath that we all know very well, right? So David, he was just a little guy. He was just a little shepherd boy. And he came to fight Goliath, who was a giant, who represented an even bigger army, who represented an even bigger nation, right? That was seeking to destroy God's people. But what did David say to Goliath? Well, I wrote it down because it's actually one of my favorite verses. He said, "You come to me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." And I tell you what, as I've gone through this adventure of going to college in my 30s, it's easy to feel, and I know you can relate, it's easy to feel like we are surrounded. It's easy to feel like we're surrounded by swords and javelins and spears. But I'll tell you what we do have. We have a word that's sharper than any two-edged sword. And the word, our words, the spoken word, the written word, it has the power to change cultures. It has the power to put us on a different trajectory. Not only that, but it has the power to plead the case of the needy and the innocent. And that's what we're all doing here. And I gotta say that I could not be more delighted to be in the company of like-minded people. Thank you again so much. I know I've babbled on and on, but I so appreciate being here with you guys. And I know that our fight starts now. You know, for me, it doesn't start when I graduate college. It doesn't start when we're finished with our campaigns. It starts where we are, and it's through our words and our actions. So thank you again. I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate you sharing your story and your heart, and giving us all a glimpse as to how real and how close this is. Mm-hmm. Before I get to my first question for you, and then I'm going to open it up, I was looking at University of Texas at Austin, which, keep in mind, Texas is pretty much a conservative state, but Austin is the liberal stronghold there. There was one professor, a Richard Lowry, who stood up against their resolution to support CRT at the University of Texas. He was the one professor who stood up and said, no, I don't support this. And they asked him, they said, what should we do? What should the students do? That was his question. What should students do? And so I want to throw this at you, Taylor, because you're doing what he said you need to do. Mm-hmm. And I know that, like Charlie Kirk and Turning Point, they say, just like you mentioned in your introduction, just put up with it, be quiet, get your degree, and then fight the battle. And I like what he said and what you're doing. He said, students should speak out and speak up. That's number one. Number two, let people know what's going on here. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're doing. And I know that you also wrote a letter to your instructor in survey form. I don't think we may have time to get to some of that, but it was pretty scathing. So let people know what's going on. And third is build a network so that you know that you are not the only one. And the 1776 Syndicate is part of that network. You are part of this network. So we are here to amplify your voice in this battle. And again, I appreciate you stepping up and fighting back, number one. I mean, you were fighting the battle all alone in those classes. So my next question, so that's my soapbox. My next question is, I know you were homeschooled for most of your high school career, but you did ask, and we acquiesced. You said you wanted to experience public school. And I know that was years ago, but you did get a chance to go to public school. So now that you are a woman in your 30s and experiencing college, I want you to reflect for just a minute back on your high school experience. And did you notice, even in some subtle ways, a shift in what you were taught at home and that went against your own values? And I know that you haven't had a chance to think about this question, so off the cuff, it's to you.
I appreciate the question. You know, I do. It's funny. I was just thinking back to that one semester that I went to high school, and I was thinking, you know, that I'm going to call that more of an anthropological endeavor. Certainly it's a different world, you know. Homeschool versus public school is always going to be a different world. What I'm thinking about now, and maybe this doesn't fully answer your question, what I'm noticing is that there is a massive shift between when I was in high school, when I did go to public school, and even now. So that's how many years have elapsed since then. You know, it's been over 13 years since I graduated high school, and I went about a year before that. So I do remember my world history teacher, you know, she actually spoke fairly, I knew her political leaning, but she was still fairly neutral. And I feel like more and more that's not the case. And certainly in my college experience, that has not been the case.
Thanks. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that, but Jim, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Taylor, thank you for being transparent in your story and sharing a portion of your life with us. It's amazing to see your passion. What I'm curious about, because we've come from different generational gaps, and by the way, your passion bleeds through Megan, who's on the call tonight. Her passion bled through. You're similar in age. My wife, who's been on the call, passion bleeds through. How do we find more people like you in our society? Because I know they're there, but, you know, I'm in my 50s and a lot of us on this call are, you know, around that age. And there's such a need to have people with a voice like yourself, but we just can't find them or get them involved or are help them to understand that it's worth the time and energy to do it, you know, because for all the reasons that you've mentioned. And I took a call today from a school board trustee that is so frustrated because she's trying to host a town hall meeting in Flathead County here, and nobody's interested in attending. And this is all about saving our kids and the curriculum and taxation. Right. But yet she's like, Jim, I can't get anybody to attend. So I don't expect you to have the answer, but I would just love to hear maybe some of the ways that you became attracted to having a voice and being more involved.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for your question. I do appreciate those thoughts. You know, your question actually made me think of a recent experience I had. My daughter's school, she goes to a little country school, and the principal is retiring. This is her last year. And so I found out the night prior that they were going to host an open for the public interview for their final candidate for the next principal. And I jumped right on that. I want to know everything. I want to know all the things, right? So I went to that interview, and her teacher, you know, looked at me and said, wow, thank you so much for being here. Like I said, this was open to the public, and there were maybe like 2 grandparents at that interview. And there might've been a couple of parents who left after a few minutes. I was the only one that was there through the whole time. So this is a board meeting. Like, you know, I'm not going to assume what everybody else was doing. I'm sure they were busy with their children in their lives. However, I did find that really interesting. So I see what you're saying about there being a lack of people who are even interested. And I definitely think, you know, all it takes to change course, all it takes to change the trajectory of what's going on is one person. So if you do know somebody, encourage them, right? And they will be, people learn far better from example than they do from, you know, just being told like, you need to do this. And so that having been said, I will say that watching my dad get into politics by accident, actually several years ago, I kind of wish that had prompted me sooner. It actually didn't, but the fact that he has now garnered this experience has really inspired me. So just don't be afraid to talk about what you're doing. Don't be afraid to continue to encourage the people that you do know, because it does. I mean, sometimes it feels like, golly, we're all alone, but it does have a ripple effect. And obviously on top of that, just prayer, because if you build it, they will come, right?
Thanks, Taylor. I think you're right. And that's been our attitude all along. If you build it, they will come. And, right. You know, we've got a comment here. It says, I found that people who aren't interested in getting involved just don't understand the stakes, and they are waiting for things to get back to normal. And I think that is probably true in a lot of cases, but I take responsibility as being one of probably the 2 oldest people on this call tonight. Well, actually 3 that I know of. I wasn't talking about you, doctor. But, you know, we kind of dropped the ball. I think we didn't see how big the stakes were. And one of our guests a couple of weeks ago, and Taylor, I believe you were on that call with Megan Wildhood, the reformed activist, liberal activist. And this is in fact a battle, and she made it quite clear, coming from the front lines of liberal attacks against our institution called America. Their goal, and I'll apologize to you right now, Mr. Riley, because when you introduced you said, you know, we need to get to know our enemy. And I thought, well, gosh, we shouldn't be calling them enemies. We should call them opponents, you know, political opponents. But by the end of that call, it was quite clear that this is, in fact, a battle, and they are playing to win. And to them, win isn't winning an election. It is literally to dismantle the fabric of this country. And so we need to make people understand, to get back to this, what the stakes are. The stakes are, if we don't have what we currently have, or some resemblance of it, we could lose it all. And the stakes have never been higher. And that is on us for not seeing how important this battle is and was, and how entrenched the opposition, the enemy, has gotten into it. So I think we need to all step up our game. And it's not just the youth, it's the parents, we parents who have youth, who are now young adults, even if they're embarking on their careers and they're busy with their lives and they're busy raising families. And I know we have, Brian Freese on the call. You're in the midst of it. You are where I was when I was in my 40s. I was busy, and I was a great taxpayer. That's my claim to fame. I was a great taxpayer, and I could feel good about that. Well, guess what? That's not enough. To keep what we have requires skin in the game. It requires participation, and it requires arming ourselves with information and tactics. We have to get involved. So Taalyr, again, I appreciate you jumping on the call, because that is getting involved and staying involved. And I know you would have done this if this were a format that didn't have your dad on it. So I appreciate that about you as well. And John, I know that we always want to go back to the words of wisdom from a lifelong educator. And what are your thoughts after listening to Taalyr tonight?
Well, I wish I had had more students like her when I was teaching school, because when a student speaks up, a discourse is possible. If students sit there like sponges, then whatever the professor or instructor is giving out ends up being taken as gospel. And it's not, no matter what it's from which side of the aisle it might be being brought forth. And our legal system is based adversarially, in that only with the conflict of free and open ideas will the truth emerge. And if students don't speak up, the truth will not emerge. So I take exception to the idea, to the suggestion that you sit there, hold your head down, regurgitate back whatever the professor wants to hear, take your grade and go home. Because remember that in reality, and most of us are old enough now to know this, unless you are using an undergraduate degree to get into an elite postgraduate course, the grades you get in college don't really mean anything, as long as you get enough to get a gentleman's C to get the degree. And if teachers are now being, shall we say, reactionary and like to do reprisals, grade reprisals against students that speak up, I will, then of course, nothing like a good lawsuit to bring it to the forefront. I have to give you experience. So when I went to I was going to graduate school after getting back from Vietnam, and I started this class. I mean, I literally walked off the Army and into the classroom with about 4 days difference. And it was very obvious I was a veteran, and very obvious I was a Vietnam veteran. We're talking in 1970, okay? And I was in a class, and this professor made a comment that anybody who had gone to Vietnam was an immoral individual and should never have done it. And I got up and very pointedly walked out of the classroom, and I never went back. And I did all my work. I did the research paper. I turned my papers in and whatever. And I was going to be interested in seeing what kind of grade I got. and I needed the class to graduate with this degree or to get this degree. And but I was interested to see, and attendance was supposedly one of the requirements. And I got A's on my papers and research project, and then I got a B in the class because I didn't go. And I was ready to sue, of course, with that. But she got the message. The instructor got the message that subject, the Vietnam War and participation, it had absolutely nothing to do with the curriculum of the class. And that was an egregious violation of professorial ethics, in my opinion. So you have to, as I say, I think that the truth emerges from an adversarial conflict of free and open exchange of ideas. Of course, when you have the truth with a capital T behind you, you're probably going to prevail if anybody's listening. But unfortunately, nobody's listening anymore. And this is what Taalyr is pointing out, is that people are just absorbing. They're not really listening. That's just kind of where I'm at on that view.
Thanks, John. It's always nice to get your wisdom, especially as a lifelong educator. If anyone else has a specific question for Taalyr or a comment, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll unmute your mic. Oh, we've got one. I see your physical hand raised. Dr. Ingram. Shoot.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, well, I'm just building on John's. Having gone to school in New York City for 8 years in the 70s and 80s, I think I got the front end wave of the Cultural Revolution following the Weatherman riots and Vietnam War protests of the late 60s. And, you know, trying to survive through what I would call the affirmative action first wave that I lived through in New York City, with Bella Abzug being our representative, and Mayor Koch and Mayor Beam as our mayors. It was a very interesting experience to try to survive and get a sniveling good grade while you snuck under the tent while you had conservative values, because otherwise you wouldn't get into med school. And once I did get into the med school that I wanted to, I went to another interview because there's 8 med schools in New York City. I decided to test the waters and actually say what I believed. And it was very interesting. It's the only school I didn't get into because even then it was toxic. The lady asked me, I had a woman physician interviewer, and she asked me, you know, if I felt that I should give up my slot to a affirmative action candidate. And I said, well, if we're equal on paper, yes, I feel that then I should bequeath my opportunity to someone else. But I said, there's lots of colleges, there's lots of opportunities at the level below, but at this level, it is a very tight and a competitive arena. And if I've got the better resume, then I feel like I should have the slot. And that was the only institution that turned me down. And so it was a big eye opener to me, knowing that even long ago, and my kids, as I've reviewed their papers over the years, and just most recently, my son that went and was in a combined program and wrote a paper that he sent to me after he got a C on it, which is a death knell now. Back when you and I and others, I don't want to speak for them, but you know, now it's if you don't get an A, you didn't get a grade, because there's such grade inflation at each generation. But he basically got axed because he had to drop the class because he wrote a paper that talked about one payer medical care and the implications of that. And he had to drop the class because the teacher gave him a C or a C minus on, I don't remember exactly what, but it was well written. He sent it back to me and said, "Hey, Dad, would you change this?" So it is toxic. And I don't know what to tell folks going through now, because they have you by the short hairs in this, basically squeeze chute to get to the next level. I don't know what, and Taylor, I just want to thank you for your insights and my sadness for hearing what you're going through.
Thank you, Dr. Ingram. I definitely appreciate your input. And wow, I love learning about this, about people's history, and the fact that you were dealing with that even then. Boy, I'm just flabbergasted, honestly. But yeah, I do. I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I'm feeling like I need to bloom where I'm planted right now. And if that means pressing on, then I'm going to press on. And what happens when it's not just me, but it's two classmates that are, expressing their open and honest opinion, and maybe 3 one day. And if not, it doesn't matter. But my sister-in-law and I actually had a recent conversation, and she said, if all that happens with these conversations is that you make somebody else question, even if one other person learns to start questioning or thinking a little bit differently, is it not worth it? And I think it absolutely is. So, but thank you for your thoughts.
Thanks, Taylor. We're getting ready to wrap up here. I'm going to end with a quick quote from Thomas Sowell. I don't know if any of you follow him, the economist, but he said, "At one time, educators boasted that their role was not to teach a student what to think, but how to think. Today, their role is far too often to teach students what to think on everything from immigration to global warming to the new sacred trinity of race, class, and gender." And that's a shame, especially for people who appreciate educators who are truly educating. And then my final comment tonight, and if anyone is taking notes, write this down. Silence is consent. We have an obligation. We all have an obligation to stop being silent and start speaking up. And I know we are taking next week off. For those of you who are live tonight, we'll send an announcement out. Next week, there are some big debates going on. And Jim and I both want to be able to not participate in that, but go to those functions in person. So we'll be taking a bye week, and from there we will be going back on live, and you'll all be getting emails on that. Jim, any final notes for the future?
Yeah, actually, the following week, we're going to have Rachel Savota on the call. She's a marketing specialist, and she's the one that owns and started My Campaign Online. So if you're looking for campaign support from a marketing perspective, she's done a fabulous job. Right now, I believe she's working with almost 20 candidates that are 76 members from across the states. And which brings me to the point, we can only lead the horse to water. You have to drink it. So all the tools are here, and it absolutely blows me away that some people we've given the tools to outside of this group and have just let them sit there, and their campaigns have gone nowhere. So as Rod said earlier, it's just not enough. We have to do a little bit more. So get in the game, get in the fight, build your materials, enjoy next week off. We're here available for anybody if you want to reach out. I've taken a lot of private calls to help people. And finally, Taylor, thank you again for your story and sharing it. And if anybody's got suggestions for others to host a call that you think will bring value here, we'd love to have them on and spread more words of our message. So thank you all. Thanks, Rod.
Thank you, Jim. Thank everybody. And again, a special thanks to you, Taylor. We appreciate your insight very much. It matters. It's making a difference. And the rest of you, especially of you candidates out there, hit the streets and talk to people. Don't just leave a flyer on a door, knock, and if someone answers, introduce yourself. That's my word for the day, candidates. Thanks, and good night to everybody. Thanks for joining.